Yes. And Bhugarva, you said they said something about Garva?
Yeah, they said they were like two souls in one.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was the uncle of the other.
Okay.
I wasn't here. I read it in the book.
Okay. Okay.
And he was a disciple of Gurudev.
Oh yeah. Vandeham Shri Guru, Shri Jutaha Padakamalam, Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha, Shri Rupam Sagrajatam, Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam, Tam Sajivam, Sadvaitam, Savadhutam, Parijana Sahitam, Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Shri Radha, Krishna Padam, Sahagana Lalita, Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. Om Jnanatimirandasya, Jnananjana Shalakaya, Chakshurun Militam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam, Pangam Langayate Girim, Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande, Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu, Vya Evacha Patitanam, Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahabhadanyaya, Krishna Prema Pradayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya, Namni Gaura Tishe Namaha. Nityanandam Namastubhyam, Premananda Pradayane, Kalau Kalmashanashaya, Janava Pataye Namaha. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindho, Dina Bandho, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostute, Tapta Kanchana, Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu, Sute Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye. Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshai Kshiptascha Kamadi Taranga Madhye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanara Vindam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shrivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams at the lotus feet of my most worshipable, beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta, Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa, Ashtatarashata, Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. Then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable, beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Ashtatarashata, Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Gosvāmī Maharaj. And Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosvāmī Maharaj. My Dandavat pranams at the lotus feet of all my Shri Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga, and especially at the lotus feet of Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Astatarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Maharaj on his divine disappearance day, the last day of Kartik. And also to Mahaprabhu's two associates, Srila Bhugarabha Goswami and Sri Kashishwara Pandit. Their appearance or disappearance days, I'm not sure of them. Okay. So many disappeared on last day of Kartik.
George Harrison also.
He did? I never heard that. On the last day of Kartik, which year?
I think it's 2000.
2001? 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I never heard the date. Auspicious. Maybe they should put it on the Vaishnava calendar.
As I'm just reading Shamasundar's 3rd volume.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of it's with George Harrison and Prabhupada. And
Oh.
my goodness.
They
They had a very
Close
deep relationship. They had a very personal relationship.
Wow.
George Harrison and Shamasundan.
And Prabhupada.
George Harrison.
Yeah,
Prabhupada.
like George Harrison,
It's in his book.
like one of the last times he met Prabhupada, you know, like he shaved his, you know, face and everything, and then he even said, "Should I shave my head? I'm ready to just put on the dhoti and everything." And he went and paid Dandavat Pranams when he saw Prabhupada. He went up and just paid Dandavat Pranams, and Prabhupada took his head, and then he was first like cutting, like almost,
yeah.
and then he even put, he said his hands in, it was like going through his hair like this.
Wow.
Like,
Where was that? The last
in
meeting?
Purī, in Purī place.
Purī?
In
Purī.
Purī.
In Purī.
Oh, Berry Place. It's
Yeah.
pronounced Berry.
Oh, it's pronounced Berry?
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
Can I borrow one of the two?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Wow.
And
Didn't he
yeah.
leave his ring for George?
Yes, he
He
did.
did, yeah. I knew that because I was in Vrindavan, and everyone knew that Prabhupada had taken the ring off of his finger. I think it was a very expensive ring that Guru Kripa had brought for Prabhupada, which was apparently, according to astrological, it was supposed to be beneficial. And I heard that what it was a black sapphire surrounded by diamonds, something like that. But that's, Prabhupada took that off. I think it was that ring. I'm pretty sure.
What an
So,
auspicious ending he had.
yeah.
And he told him also that
Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. Jai Jagannath.
because he was offering to just completely surrender. And Prabhupada says, no, from the position you're in, you're spreading the holy name of Krishna all over the world. Just continue as you are.
What year was his final meeting with Prabhupada?
Is that, I don't know.
His wife.
Well, if it was at Berry Place,
Yeah, it was
that would have been,
3, 4.
let me think.
74.
74. Yeah, it could have been any of those years, 74, 75. Because they actually still were in Berry Place, but Prabhupada's visit there, besides his final visit to the manor, not to Berry Place, that was in 77. So it could have been 74, 75, something like that.
I don't know whether it was her imagination, but I saw an interview with his wife,
Uh-huh.
and she said when he left, the light kind of.
I saw that. I saw that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
She-
Sundar and Mukunda were there.
Yes. They were the only two who, besides George Harrison's wife and son, and George. Yeah, the way that she said that, she said, she's trying to keep it kind of covered as she said it, but she said, you didn't need a light in the room. So it was pretty profound. And I just learned on the last day of Kartik, Jai. That was in America, right? Where you left?
Los Angeles.
Yeah. Acha, okay. I'm just going to quickly look up these two associates.
He's a nice person, aside from being a devotee. He's a nice person. You saw him in interviews on TV and things like that. Very intelligent.
He is very humble, but at times he's a little fiery. They said, what do you think the solution is to the world's problems? And he said, oh, very simple. You take all the politicians and all the leaders of the big corporations in the world, line them up and shoot them. It's like, it's something Prabhupada probably would appreciate, I don't know.
When my father was atheist, and he said his favorite song was My Sweet Lord. He said,
Well, that means he wasn't an atheist.
yeah, actually, yeah, not external.
That's okay. All right, so Kashishvara Pandit, I'm reading something. This is from Srila Bhakti Bhagavatirtha, Gosvāmī Maharaj's book. And this is a quote from Gaura Ganadesha Deepika. Pura Vrindavane Chaitau Stito Bringara Banguro Sri Kashishvara Govindo To Jato Prabhu Sevako. Srila Kashishvara Pandit, also Brahmachari or Gosvāmī, also called by both of those names. He was Krishna's servant Bringar, and Govinda was Bangur. Bringar and Bangur, Krishna's servant. They became Mahaprabhu's servants in Gaur Lila. Some Kashishvara, some say Kashishvara was the Saki Shashi Rekha. So Gaur Ganadesha Deepika. Kashishvara Pandit's home was in the village of Chatara in the district of Hooghly, about 1 mile from the present day Serampur or Śrīrampur railway station. His father was Vasudev Bhattacharya, a Brahmin of the Vatsya Gotra in the line of Kanva. Kanva is a Muni Rishi. He also had the title Chaudhuri. The temple, which belonged to Kashishvara Pandit, is situated in the neighborhood of Chatara village, and it is known as Chaudhuri Para. He established deities of Gauranga and Sri Radha Govinda. There is an annual festival there on Dol Purnima. Kashishvara Pandit was very powerful physically. Rudra Pandit of Ballabhapur was his nephew. So now it's explaining how Kashishvara was Ishwara Puri's disciple. Kashishvara Pandit was a disciple of Ishwara Puri who had received much mercy from him. For this reason, He is counted as one of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's branches. Sri Govinda was also Ishvara Puri's disciple. Both of them devotedly served their spiritual master as long as he was present in this world. And just before he disappeared, he instructed them both to go engage in Mahaprabhu's service. So Govinda was the first to come to Puri to serve the Lord after the disappearance of their guru. Kashishwara traveled throughout India on a pilgrimage before finally coming to Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. Here's 2 quotes from Chaitanya Charitamrita. I am a servant of Ishvara Puri Pad. My name is Govinda. On his order, I have come to you. He's telling this to Mahaprabhu. At the time of his departure, my master ordered me, go to Sri Krishna Chaitanya and serve him. Kashishwara will also come after he has seen the pilgrimage sites. I have come directly to you. Here's another quote from the same chapter. On another day, Kashishwara Gosai arrived. The Lord greeted him respectfully and gave him a place to stay with him. So the Lord turned to Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, oh, there's more quotes. These are all quotes. I'm just reading the quotes. Yes.
He felt awkward taking his spiritual master's godbrothers as servants. So
Mahaprabhu felt.
So we went to Sarvabhauma.
So the Lord turned to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The servant of my spiritual master is my superior. It's Mahaprabhu telling to Sarvabhauma. So how can I accept his service? On the other hand, I do not obey his order. On the other hand, if I do not obey his order, that too would be an offense. Whose order? Ishvara Puri's. What should I do? Sarvabhauma answered that he should most certainly obey the instruction of his spiritual master. And so the Lord did as his guru had ordered him, and he accepted Govinda and Kashishwar Pandit as his personal servants. Then, on the order of his father, oh, this is about Parashuram, and it says it's from the Raghu Vamsha, some Shastra. Here's the quote. On the order of his father, Parashuram killed his own mother, as though she were an enemy. When he heard this, Lakshman accepted the order of his elder brother Ram, for the orders of a guru are not to be debated. Oh, this is the actual quote. I've heard it before. A lot of times Srila Bhaktivinoda Bharati Maharaj has quoted this. So it's a very famous verse from the Raghu Vamsha. And it says in the last line, this is what I've heard. Agya Guru Nam hi avacharaniya. Agya Guru Nam hi avicharaniya. Should not be debated. The Agya, the order of Guru, must never be avacharaniya, means debated or try to examine it, simply follow. So, then, this is from the Ramayana Ayodhya Kanda. It doesn't say who's speaking it, but I think it's Lakshman. I must follow the order of my Guru because he is a great soul. You will certainly benefit from this, but even more so will I. Nirvikaram gurur agya maya karya mahatmanaha shreyo hyevam bhavatyascha mama chaiva viveshata. Now, Kashishvara's service to Mahaprabhu. I already have the image in my mind because this is the most prominent image. Is like during Rath Yatra, Kashishvara Pandit was making the most powerful circle.
In the middle circle.
Yeah. So whenever Mahaprabhu went to see Jagannath, Kashishvara would use his physical strength to hold back the crowds, allowing the Lord to pass without being touched by anyone. Ishwara Puri's disciples were Kashishvara Brahmachari and Govinda. This is a quote. This is a quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita also. At the time of his departure from this world, he instructed them both to come to Nilachala and to engage in Mahaprabhu's personal service. The Lord considered them both to be his superiors because they had personally served his spiritual master. But he nevertheless accepted their service because it was his Guru's order. Govinda would engage in personal bodily service, while Kashishvara would go before him when he went to see Jagannath. He would push people aside to make a path for the Lord so that he could go through the crowd without being touched. Nice seva.
Shivananda.
Yeah, I mean like Gurudev's?
Shivananda.
Shivananda saying, yeah. Next quote is also from Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahaprabhu joyfully took the devotees to the temple to see Jagannath. Kashishvara led the way, clearing the path, while Govinda followed, carrying the Lord's water pot. In Purī, the abode of the Supreme Person, Purushottam Dham, when the Lord was dancing in front of Jagannath's Rath Yatra cart, 3 rings of people would be formed around the Lord in order to hold the people back. The innermost ring consisted of Nityananda Prabhu and other devotees, the second of Kashishvara, Mukunda and others, and the third of King Prataparudra and his bodyguards. Kashishvara, Mukunda, and many other devotees held hands to form a second protective circle. Kashishvara was one of the 7 persons who would serve Mahaprasad to the devotees after the Kirtan at the Rath Yatra. The others were Swarup Damodar, Jagadananda, Damodar, Gopinath, Vaninath, and Shankar. Kashishvara also participated in some of the Lord's Leelas in Navadvip, such as the Kirtans at Srivasangam and bathing in the Ganga. He was also present when the Lord went with Kirtan to the house of Sridhar and drank from his iron pot. He, along with the other devotees present, cried to see the Lord's mercy on that occasion. Govinda, Govindanandana, Sri Garba, Śrīmad, Jagadananda, and Ram were others present on that occasion. So this is all from Chaitanya Bhagavat. Vrindavan Das Thakur tells just how dear Kashishvara was to the Lord, calling Mahaprabhu Kashishvara's heart on one occasion and the wealth of Kashishvara's life. Kashishvara Pranadana. So Vrindavan Das Thakur is naming Mahaprabhu according to his relationship, how dear Kashishvara was to him. So he called Mahaprabhu the heart of Kashishvara on one occasion, and the wealth of Kashishwar's life, Kashishwar Pranadana. He was also present when Mahaprabhu went to greet Advaita and the other devotees when they arrived from Bengal. His disappearance day is on the 14th day of the waxing moon in the month of Kartik, which is today. According to another opinion, it is on the full moon day of the month of Ashwin when the Ras Purnima of Radha Krishna is also celebrated. So, Sri Lokanath Goswami and Srila Bhugarbha Goswami. You read this today? Gaur Ganodesha Deepika says, Lokanathakya Goswami Sri Lila Manjari Pura. Lokanath Goswami was known as Lila Manjari in Krishna Lila. Lokanath is considered to be Mahaprabhu's direct disciple and associate. And prior to coming to Navadvip, he lived in the village of Talakari in Jeshore district in what is now Bangladesh. And prior to that, he lived in Kanchanpara. His father's name was Padmanabha Chakravarti and his mother Sita Devi. The Bhakti Ratnakara quotes an old verse which confirms this. Here's the verse. Śrīmad Radha Vinodaika Seva Sampat Samanvitam Padmanabhatmajam Śrīmal Lokanath Prabhum Lokanatha Prabhum Bhaje. I worship Lokanath Prabhu, the son of Padmanabha, whose life revolved around the wealth of service he possessed in his deity Radha Vinod. The descendants of Lokanath's brother, Pragalbha Bhattacharya, are still living in Talakari. Bhugarbha Goswami was Lokanath's closest friend and constant companion. He was Prema Manjari in Braj. So, who was Bhugarbha Goswami in Braj? Prema Manjari. And who was Lokanath Goswami? Lila. Prema and Lila. Bhugarbha Thakurasya Asit Purvakya Prema Manjari. According to the Sadhana Deepika, Bhugarbha was Lokanath's paternal uncle. The Shaka Nirnayamrita adds the following comments on Bhugarbha Goswami. Jai Shri Jagannath. Goswaminam cha Bhugarbham Gubargotam Suvishrutam Sada Mahashayam Vande Krishna Prema Pradam Prabhum. Srila Govinda Devasya Seva Sukha Vilasanam Dayalun Premadam Svacham Nityam Ananda Vigraham. This is a quote from the Saka Nirnayamritam. So many Shastras, never even heard their names. So many. I offer my reverence to the illustrious Bhugarbha Prabhu, who is said to have been born from the bowels of the earth. Bhugarbha, that's what it means. I don't know if the translation is so appropriate, the bowels of the earth, because Garbha means womb, from the womb of the earth. He bestows love of Krishna. He takes pleasure in the service of Govinda Dev. He is compassionate, simple, and always joyful. Bhugarbha Goswami's initiating guru was
Gadadhar
Gadadhar Pandit Goswami. He is therefore considered to be Gadadhar's branch. Sri Bhagavan Das, a fellow disciple of Srila Gadadhar Pandit Goswami, was also a close friend. Bhugarbha and Bhagavat Das are branches of Gadadhar Pandit, both of whom went to live in Vrindavan. And here's a section called Lokanath and Bhugarbha go to Braj. Lokanath Goswami renounced the householder ashram in 1431 of the Shaka era, which is 1510. And he came to meet Mahaprabhu in Navadvip. Mahaprabhu immediately told him to go and live in Vrindavan, telling him that it was his own intention to take sannyas very shortly and to go there himself. Lokanath started to cry. Let's see, how old Mahaprabhu would have been?
1510.
Well, 1510.
24.
Yeah, just before he took sannyas then, right? So Lokanath started to cry when he imagined the Lord with his beautiful curls shorn and the distress the devotees would feel at his departure. When the Lord saw Lokanath's anxiety, he embraced him and consoled him with various spiritual instructions, and Lokanath surrendered completely to him. And when Bhugarbha saw how unhappy Lokanath was, he decided to accompany him to Vrindavan. The two companions walked through Raj Mahal, Tajpur, Purnia, Lucknow, and many holy places before finally arriving in Braj. Though he had come to Vrindavan on Mahaprabhu's order, he constantly felt intense separation from the Lord, shedding copious tears in his desire to see him again. And when he got the news that Mahaprabhu had taken sannyas and then gone to Purī and thence to the south on pilgrimage, Lokanath hurried to southern India in order to join him. When he arrived in the south, he heard that Mahaprabhu was no longer there, but had gone to Vrindavan. Lokanath immediately set off for Vrindavan, hoping to see the Lord there. But by the time he arrived, he heard that the Lord was now in Prayag. Lokanath was disappointed, but still determined to see the Lord, and decided to set off again for Prayag. This time, however, Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream. And that's just as good, right? Mm-hmm. And told him to stop running around and remain in Vrindavan and do his bhajan. Not long afterwards, Rupa Sanatan, Gopal Bhatta Goswamis, and others of the Lord's associates started coming to live in Braj. Their association cheered him immensely. When Rupa was getting old and unable to walk all the way to Govardhan, he missed being able to see Gopal. And when the desire became strong, Gopal came to stay at the house of Vitaleshwar in Mathura, ostensibly out of fear of Muslim iconoclasts, but actually to show mercy to Rupa Goswami. The deity stayed there for a month, during which time Rupa came for his darshan with Lokanath and other Gaudiya Vaishnavas. The extent to which Bhugarbha Goswami was dear to Lokanath is described in Bhakti Ratnakara. Here's the quote. Lokanath's affection for Bhugarbha was well known everywhere. They only had different bodies. In spirit, they were one. Then Gopal Bhatta Goswami was extremely compassionate. Bhugarbha and Lokanath are a gold mine of virtues. This is the quote from Bhakti Ratnakara. Lokanath Goswami worshipped Radha and Krishna in a state of separation, increasing the intensity of his renunciation. He was afraid of the slightest amount of fame, and thus he forbade Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami to write anything about him in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, with the result that only his name can be found mentioned there. Sanatana Goswami has also mentioned his name in the Mangalacharana to the Hari Bhakti Vilas, as well as in that of the Vaishnava Toshani commentary to the 10th canto of the Śrīmad Bhagavatam. He says, Vrindavana Priyan Bande Shri Govinda Padashritam Śrīmad Kashishvaram Lokanatham Shri Krishna Dasakam. I pay obeisance to Kashishwara, Lokanath, and Krishna Das, to whom residence in Vrindavan is very dear, and who have taken shelter of Govinda's lotus feet. Now comes section Lokanath and Radha Vinod. I'm just going to check a little bit farther. Narottam Das, become Lokanath disciple. And that's it. So that's what we have for Bhugarva Goswami. Bhugarva Goswami. Because he's not mentioned separately in this book. Yes, so Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Maharaj. Actually, no, it would be here. It would be here. Let me see.
It's only about 3 pages. It's really very beautiful.
Yeah. Here it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll read this. In the early years of this century, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur set into motion a devotional revival that rapidly spread through Bengal, India, and eventually the world. He put into question the very foundations of present-day theistic thought in a way that has little comparison anywhere in the spiritual record, east or west. That's a nice way, huh? That he put into question the very foundations of present-day theistic thought in a way that has little comparison anywhere in the spiritual record, east or west. Through him, the world was awakened to the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the movement of pure devotion, Shuddha Bhakti. In orchestrating this modern bhakti revolution, Srila Prabhupada gathered some of the greatest spiritual luminaries in contemporary history into his circle. Such convergence of exalted spiritual personalities can only be compared to the coming together of Sri Chaitanya's direct followers in the 16th century. One of the devotional giants who entered Srila Prabhupada's orbit was His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Goswami Maharaj. We cannot describe the life of Srila Purī Goswami Maharaj without emphasizing his contribution to the spiritual movement in which he was so integrally involved. The depth of his accomplishments cannot be fathomed outside the context of Sri Gaudiya Mat. With his fellow God brothers, he shared an indomitable faith in the service of his Guru and the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This service was the sole purpose and highest aspiration of his being. This conviction led him to spend his entire life in the pursuit of Srila Prabhupada and Mahaprabhu's pleasure and the fulfillment of their desires. If we examine his life in this setting, we will see more than just numbers, dates, places, and names. We will see how he embodied the very life current that his spiritual preceptors came to give to the world. Srila Purī Goswami Maharaj took birth in the village of Ganganandapur in Jeshore district, present-day Bangladesh, on October 8th, 1898. So he was 2 years younger than our Prabhupada. His parents, Tarini Charan Chakravarti and Srimati Ram Rangini Devi, named him Sri Pramoda Bhushan Chakravarti. During his childhood, he met his Vartma Pradarsha Guru. That means one who opens the door to the path of devotion. And who is that? Srila Bhakti Ratna Thakur, a god brother and Siksha disciple of Thakur Bhakti Vinod. God brother of Bhakti Vinod and also Siksha disciple of Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So he's telling, he was a Siksha disciple of Thakur Bhakti Vinod, the legendary architect of the present Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. Yes? Yes. He's the one. Through Bhakti Ratna Thakur, he was introduced to Sajjana Toshini, Bhakti Vinod Thakur's own Vaishnava periodical, which was filled with Bhakti Vinod's commentaries and his holy teachings. In this way, Srila Purī Maharaj became familiar with the seminal works of the Shuddha Bhakti tradition, such as Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, and the Śrīmad Bhagavatam. It was also through Bhakti Ratna Thakur that he first learned of his future guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Gosvāmī Prabhupada. Srila Purī Maharaj was still a young university student when he first came before Srila Prabhupada at the Yoga Pit in Sri Mayapur in 1915. It was a significant occasion as Srila Prabhupada's Diksha Guru, Paramhansa Thakur Śrīmad Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, had entered his eternal abode only the day before. Srila Purī Maharaj often recounted that as soon as he saw Srila Prabhupada and paid his obeisances to him for the first time, he knew in his heart this was his spiritual master. Imagine that. I mean, that's inconceivable. He meets Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada at the Yoga Pit of Mahaprabhu in 1915, one day after his Gurudev departed. And we know what day his Gurudev departed. It was 4 days ago, or 3 days ago, right? On the Ekadashi. So he met him on the next day. And he knew, when he paid his obeisances to him for the first time, he knew in his heart that this was his spiritual master. Some years later, on the auspicious day of Sri Krishna Janmashtami in 1923, so that's 8 years later, he accepted both Harinam and Mantra Diksha from Srila Prabhupada, and he was given the name Pranav Ananda Brahmachari. Pranav Ananda. So actually, when he met him in 1915, he was only 17 years old, is it? Or 18, like that. So at the time, Sri Gaudiya Math was rapidly establishing itself as a bona fide manifestation of Indian religious culture and was transforming the caste-conscious socio-religious world of Hinduism. Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur was bringing together his intimate associates to share the wealth of Sri Krishna Sankirtan. He had accepted Sri Dandi Sannyas in 1918, and by the early 1920s had already assumed a formidable position in the Bengali spiritual firmament. He was fearless when it came to upholding true religious principles. The students and the practitioners of the Gaudiya Math aligned themselves with this attitude and led most exemplary lives of devotion imbued with austerity, discipline, and in-depth scriptural learning. This high standard of religious life was the hallmark of Sri Gaudiya Mat and would be the thread that guided all of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, including Srimad Purī Gosvāmī Maharaj. The keystone of success in devotion is to perfectly hear the holy words spoken by one's spiritual preceptor. The keystone of success. Srila Prabhupada would often say, quote, "All that is required of you is that you lend me your ears." Srila Purī Maharaj was fully committed to this maxim. He had the great good fortune to associate closely with Srila Prabhupada for 13 years. And during that time, he served him personally by recording his lectures and conversations, which were later published. The greater part of Srila Prabhupada's spoken words we are left with today come from the transcription of these notes. At the same time, Srila Purī Maharaj cultivated a deep knowledge of the Vaishnava scriptures, with the result that he became a veritable storehouse of the wealth of the preceptorial line coming from Sri Chaitanya and his followers. This led him to become one of the most prolific writers and influential teachers in all of Gaudiya Vaishnava history. His writings reflect the disciplined eye of a scholar who expresses with grace and directness the purest scriptural conclusions, supported by his own uncommonly profound realization. Nice way, very nicely written. Following Srila Prabhupada's directives, Srila Purī Maharaj edited, wrote for, published, and helped distribute countless spiritual publications. He was initially inspired and directed by Srila Prabhupada to start writing and contributing articles to the Gaudiya magazine, the backbone of the Gaudiya Mat's missionary work. For 7 years, he served as a proofreader and as one of its primary editors. In 1926, he was charged with running the world's only daily Vaishnava newspaper, Dainik Nadia Prakash. Dainik means daily. He held this service for 2 years. That means about 700 days. Publishing all of his preceptors' daily discourses, along with articles by fellow students and other contemporaries. His service and learning did not pass unnoticed by Srila Prabhupada, who awarded him the titles of Maha Mahopadeshak, the great instructor, and Pratna Vidyalankar, the keeper of the wisdom of the ancient scriptural lore. Pratna Vidyalankar. After the disappearance of his Gurudev in 1937, Srila Purī Maharaj continued his vocation of spreading the teachings of Sri Chaitanya through the Gaudiya magazine, first out of the Bagh Bazar Gaudiya Mat, and then later the Sri Chaitanya Mat in Mayapur. After he founded the Sri Chaitanya Gaudiya Mat, Srila Purī Gosvāmī Maharaj's godbrother, Śrīmad Bhakti Madhav Maharaj, invited him to head the editorial board of Chaitanya Vani magazine in 1964. Purī Maharaj served in this capacity for 33 years, furthering his life's work of preserving the teachings of his spiritual lineage. Through Chaitanya Vani, he continued to make a deep impact on the devotional world. In all, Srila Purī Maharaj's wisdom is embodied in over 60 years of writings on Vaishnava philosophy and theology. He penned a rich variety of texts, bringing the Bhagavad Dharma to life through hundreds of poems, essays, narratives, diaries, editorials, and personal letters, thus creating a storehouse of the wealth of pure devotion for his disciples and the world at large. And that's why we have his books. Yes, the Mandala Media ones. In 1942, Srila Prabhupada appeared to Srila Purī Maharaj in a dream vision, and he imparted to him the sannyas mantra, ordering him to accept the renounced order. After accepting Tridandi sannyas from his godbrother, Bhakti Gaurava Vaikanas Maharaj in Champahati in August of 1946, he toured parts of India with other godbrothers, such as Bhakti Hriday Bhan Maharaj, Bhakti Dvaita Madhav Maharaj. And in the meantime, he continued to write and lecture with dedication. At the behest of his godbrother Tridandi Swami Bhakti Vilas Tirtha Maharaj, he also served for 7 years as chief pujari for the Yog Peeth temple, the birth site of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Purī Maharaj took up a more solitary life of worship in the 1950s. He moved to a humble cottage on the banks of the Ganga in Ambika, Kalna. Yes. The king of Burdwan was extremely impressed by his saintly ascetic character, and on the appearance day of Srimati Radharani in 1958, presented him with the ancient Ananta Vasudev temple in Kalna. In 1989, at the age of 91, Srila Purī Gosvāmī Maharaj established the Sri Gopinath Gaudiya Math in Ishodhyan, Sri Mayapur. Yes, 1989, at the age of 91. So he was 102 years of age when he departed. So he established the Sri Gopinath Gaudiya Math in Ishodhyan, Sri Mayapur, for the service of their divine lordships, Sri Sri Gaur Gadadhar, Jagannath Dev, Radha Gopinath, and Lakshmi Narsinghadev. And in the following years, he established other temples in Jagannath Puri, in Vrindavan, Calcutta, and Midnapur. Yeah, so his temple in Jagannath Puri is so spectacular. I think that was established after he left.
He had another temple.
Yes, a couple of blocks away from there. It wasn't really like a built temple. It was a room and like a mutt, just a rented building. And yes, and of course in Mayapur. Wonderful. And his samadhi there also.
Such a beautiful samadhi architecture.
Yeah. So then, Srila Purī Maharaj taught through his every action. He excelled in all aspects of devotional practice. And there was perhaps no area in which he did not exhibit utmost expertise, diligence, and foresight. This ranged from his encyclopedic knowledge of scripture to maintaining the printing press, to his beautiful singing of kirtan. He was especially recognized for his sensitivity and his attention to detail in the performance of deity worship and devotional rites, and was thus widely called upon to be the head priest in most of the Gaudiya Math's deity installations and ceremonial functions. He was rarely known to rest. His service was an uninterrupted flow. Even in his later years, he would remain awake writing and chanting through the night, while all his youthful disciples were still asleep. When his personal servants came in the morning, they would inevitably find him awake and chanting the holy name, arisen before everyone else in the ashram. Huh? I know. Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Maharaj had outstanding love for his god brothers, and he was inspired in his glorification of others. He found richness in everyone he met. He had the quality of making one feel so much wanted and their life so much valued. At the same time, he paid the least attention to himself. He was an emblem of humility and simplicity, and his generosity of spirit and kindness touched the hearts of the whole Vaishnava community. Among his lifetime intimate companions were Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Gosvāmī Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, and Srila Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And toward the end of his sojourn in this world, he was honored by the Gaudiya Vaishnava community for his learning, his long life of service and devotion, and he was made president of the World Vaishnava Association in 1995.
What year did he leave?
99.
99.
Yeah, 4 years later. Here's a quote, but let me see where it's from. Okay, anyway, here's quotation marks. Okay. He has love for his guru, and let it be known that his life is one with his words. This tribute, coming from Srila Prabhupada himself, is the most revealing statement about Srila Purī Gosvāmī Mahārāja's personality and qualities. I'm reading that again. He has love for his guru, and let it be known that his life is one with his words. Yes. He gave credit for all of his accomplishments to the mercy of his Gurudev alone. Through the blessings of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur, Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Maharaj attracted the hearts of so many to the Bhagavad religion. That's our religion, by the way. Anybody ever asked you, say, Bhagavad religion? Yeah. People from so many different backgrounds and countries found in him a true spiritual guide and shelter. He upheld the principles of pure Vaishnavism and delineated the path of Sharanagati. He so embodied pure devotion and service to his spiritual master that one of his disciples once remarked that he was able to silently lay down Srila Prabhupada's entire Siddhanta. We are greatly indebted to his divine grace for his gift, which is a lifetime of pure devotion, spanning over a century, which we can aspire for, learn from, and discuss about for our own spiritual nourishment. Srila Purī Maharaj departed this world for the eternal abode in the pre-dawn hours of Narayan Chaturdasi, October 21, 1999. One day before the Ras Purnima.
He almost made it into 3 centuries.
Yeah, right. His divine body was transported from Jagannath Puri to the Gopinath Gaudiya Math in Ishodhyan, and there placed in his eternal Samadhi shrine. Prior to his departure from this world, Srila Purī Maharaj appointed his intimate disciple, Sripad Bhakti Vibhud Bodhayan Maharaj, as his successor, and President Acharya of Sri Gopinath Gaudiya Math. In years to come, as more of his words and vision are translated, the world outside of Bengal and India will come to know the spirit of the true Vaishnava religion that he tirelessly shared. May the gentle rain of nectar of his perfect teachings continue to bring auspiciousness into this world. Gaur Premanandi, Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Maharāja Ki Jai, Tadiya Tirobhav Mahamahotsav Titi, Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Maharāja Ki Jai.
You know, he wrote the introduction to this book too.
To
the book that you're reading.
Oh, really? Oh, you read that today?
I didn't read it today.
Yep. And he also wrote all the articles in this book.
Yes.
The Heart of Krishna. This is the first one that came out in English, printed by, yeah. And this book, I had a very profound experience reading it. I'll just tell it. 1995, I had gone for the first time to Malaysia. And Pran, Prabhu, Champakalata, they were in Vrindavan at the time, visiting Gurudev. This is around month of May. It was getting hot in Vrindavan. And I was experimenting with this painting sales, that whole story. And so I was there for a couple of weeks, and then I decided to fly to Vrindavan. And I did, and met Gurudev and the other Vaishnavas who were there. Tirthapada Prabhu was there at the time also. And they were busy editing the Venugit manuscript. And I got involved with that also. And then in the meantime, Pran left earlier to go to Malaysia for the first time. I was the guinea pig, and then after me, then he came. And I told him where to stay. We had a hotel called Chamtan Hotel, and it was all connected with the Gaur Govinda Maharaj disciples and all that, you know. And so that time period, we were both living in this Chamtan Hotel, renting separate rooms. And one day I began to read this book. Maybe I was already reading it for a day, you know.
Was it published in this format?
Exactly, this is the book, exactly, yep. And one story after another that he took from Shastras about Vaishnava Parad. And I was just becoming so overwhelmed, and then I came to the part in the book where the story is told from Chaitanya Bhagavat, how when Mahaprabhu was doing his Mahaprakash Lila, you know, exhibiting his godhood, sitting on the altar for 22 hours. And it was during that time that all of his associates were there, and he was calling them one by one. There's a whole dialogue in that chapter. I think there's more than one, maybe 2 chapters describing that whole Leela. And then it described that Mother Sachi, who previously had committed what is called an offense against Advaita Acharya. Why?
Because her son, her firstborn son, was taking instruction from him and took sannyas. Well,
yeah.
Yes.
Say that again.
So Vishwarup, her firstborn son, was taking instruction from the Advaita Acharya and then took sannyas, which upset Sachi Devi.
He called them Dvaita.
Yeah, he called it Dvaita.
Right.
Divide, too.
Yeah. And so because of that, even though she was doing this in prema, right? But Mahaprabhu was very strict with her. Because Mahaprabhu was actually giving prema to each associate one by one. And when Mother Sachi came, Mahaprabhu said, no, I cannot give you prema. And then, I forget what dialogue took place after that, but the whole incident about Sri Advaita Charya, Mahaprabhu was very upset that she had said that about Advaita Charya. And all of the devotees were drowning in an ocean of tears that Mahaprabhu would not give the mother of the universe, Sachi Devi, prema. But then finally, Advaita Charya, who was there,
He didn't want it.
Huh?
He didn't want her apology.
Who didn't?
You're the mother
Yes,
of the universe.
yes, yes. But still, she fell at his feet and took the dust from his feet. And then Mahaprabhu gave her prema. But when I read that, I was actually so overwhelmed, and I began weeping and weeping. I always remember that, sitting there in this hotel room and reading this, just weeping from the core of my heart. Actually, Pran came and knocked on the door a little bit after. And I came to the door and opened the door, and I was just like dripping with tears. He said, what happened? He said, come in, come in. He said, I was reading Bhakti Pramoda Purī Maharaj's book, and when it talked about Mother Sachi not getting prema, became completely, devastated. So his books have so much power, so much potency, and I've read them, all of those books that are printed by the Mandala Media, and it's so, like just this description that we just heard, so eloquently written by Srila Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Maharaj, who knew Srila Purī Maharaj for like 70 years or something, and he so beautifully glorified him. So I really did experience, and every time I read any of his articles or any of his books, they're so perfect, so perfect, so painstaking, the way of his writing and quoting the different verses and everything. So, all glories to Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. So, let me just read something from him in 10 minutes, and then we'll finish.
Maharaj, can we angle the light a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's good.
Is that better?
Yeah, a lot better.
Okay. This introduction is such a perfect classical presentation of the whole topic of Vaishnava Vrat. So we won't be able to read the whole thing, but just so we can hear a bit. The etymological development of the word aparad is radhat arthat aradanat apagataha. Radhat arthat aradanat apagataha, which means to be distanced from worship. The etymological development of the word aparad, Because in that word is actually the actual word radha. So aparad means to be distanced from worship. Offenses committed at the lotus feet of Vaishnavas, the devotees, distance one from devotional service to the Supreme Lord. But in a higher sense, it means to be removed from the service of Sri Radha. All divine service to Krishna is being conducted under her direction. To offend her servitors is to make one unfit for her divine service. The whole aim of Krishna consciousness is Radha Dasyam, the divine service of Sri Radha. And offenses at the lotus feet of Vaishnavas make one unfit for such service.
Excuse me, which book is this?
Bhakti, Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Braj.
Which one?
The Heart of Krishna.
Oh, okay.
The Lord is overly protective of his devotees. He is Bhaktavatsal, right? Overly protective of his devotees. He cannot tolerate any offense against them. They have bhakti, devotion, and they can awaken it within us. Bhakti is the sole means to attain Krishna, who is a slave of devotion. The same is true of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Chaitanya Bhagavat states, quote, "A person can attain the shelter of Mahaprabhu only by the grace of a higher Vaishnava. Religious practices and even chanting the holy name without devotion is useless." Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada writes in his commentary, quote, "Without developing a spirit of service, chanting the holy name is in vain. Real devotion can only be cultivated when one receives the blessings of an unalloyed devotee." When can real devotion be cultivated?
And one attains the blessings of an unalloyed devotee.
Yes, only when one attains those blessings. Bhakti means devotion. Vrindavan Das Thakur says, quote, "If a person commits an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, even though he may have received Krishna's mercy, he will never attain divine love praying." Did you hear that quote? I'm going to read it again. If a person, this is coming from Vrindavan Das Thakur in Chaitanya Bhagavat, if a person commits an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, even though he may have received Krishna's mercy, he will never attain divine love praying. Srila Prabhupada writes in this context, he's quoting from Prabhupada's commentary on that verse, on that statement. Even if one is a Vaishnava, if he commits offenses to the holy name, he becomes unfit to render pure devotion. Although it may appear that he is still being shown favor by the Lord, as he continues to make a show of chanting without difficulty, the Lord is actually very displeased with him because of his antagonism toward devotees. Therefore, to give up nam aparad, we must first give up sadhu ninda, or finding fault with devotees. Now, regarding the phrase, Krishna kripa hoy leo, that means, even though he may receive Krishna's mercy. This is still the commentary of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. because we just read that a person, I'll read that again, if a person commits an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, even though he may have received Krishna's mercy, he will never attain divine love, praying. And now, in regard to the Bengali of that verse, Krishna Kripa Hoi Leo, that means even though he may receive Krishna's mercy. So Srila Saraswati Thakur comments in this regard. Quote, people may think that because an offender appears to continue to chant without difficulty, the Lord must still favor him. But they are wrong. The Lord is not even slightly moved by their sham devotion. The author of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Vrindavan Das Thakur, says that these statements are not his alone. They are the verdict of the Vedas. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did not tolerate any disrespect towards genuine Vaishnavas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also emphatically denounced any insults directed at Vaishnava devotees. To understand the seriousness of Vaishnava aparad, offending devotees, one must grasp the multifaceted, multidimensional nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To understand the seriousness of Vaishnava aparad. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the source of all incarnations in Kali Yuga, and he is the savior of all souls. He is Krishna, the son of Mahārāja Nanda, fully enriched with the mood and the radiance of Sri Radha. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami offers prayers to all of these manifestations in the preface of Sri Chaitanya Charitamritam. What is that? Verse 1 of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas Kaviraj. Vande Gurun, Isha Bhaktan, Isham, Ishavatarakan, Tat Prakashamscha, Tat Shakti, Krishna Chaitanya Sangyakam. So what is being explained is, to understand the seriousness of Vaishnava aparad, offending devotees, one must grasp the multifaceted, multidimensional nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is kind of like the verse, not fully, not exactly, but it's kind of like the verse Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam. So this is the first verse. This is the opening verse of the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita, wherein Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, I offer my obeisances unto all the gurus, unto the devotees, to the Lord's avatars, his expansions, his shaktis, his energies, and the primeval Lord himself, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. In the same way that Mahaprabhu is Krishna, he expands as Nityananda Prabhu, his Prakash, who is Balaram. Balaram's partial expansion is Sadashiv, Mahavishnu Avatar, whose counterpart in Chaitanya Lila is Advaitacharya. What is left of Sri Radhika after Krishna has plundered her emotions and luster is Sri Gadadhar Pandit. Of course, Gurudev had another discussion about that, but nevertheless, this is well known. Sri Gadadhar and Swarup Damodar are his Shakti, his energies. Bhakta means Srivas Thakur, who is Sri Narad Muni in Krishna Lila. Isha, divinity, means Mahaprabhu himself. The complete conception of divinity must include the predominating moiety and the predominated moiety. The slightest disregard to any one of these is equal to disregarding the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. There are two aspects to the Guru principle: the Siksha, or instructing Guru, and the Diksha, or initiating Guru. Both are represented in Srivas Thakur. In the beginning of the second chapter of the Antya Lila of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami offers the following invocation. And then he quotes here, Vandeham Shri Guru, Shri Jata Padakamina, that verse. I offer my obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Guru, to all the preceptors on the path of devotion. I offer my obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, and to Sri Rupa Goswami and his associates, Raghunath Das and Sri Jiva. I offer my obeisances to Advaita Acharya, Nityananda Avaduta, Gadadhar Pandit, and to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with all his devotees headed by Srivas Thakur. I then offer my obeisances to the lotus feet of Sri Radha and Sri Krishna and all the gopis headed by Lalita and Vishaka. So in the above invocatory prayers, Mangala Charana, the Vaishnavas are venerated. Kaviraj Goswami writes further, quote, before beginning the narration of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, simply by meditating on Sri Guru, the Vaishnavas, and divinity, I invoke their benedictions. Such meditation destroys all detriments on the spiritual path and helps them to fulfill all their desires.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. Before beginning the narration of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, simply by meditating on Sri Guru and the Vaishnavas and divinity, I invoke their benediction. Such meditation destroys all detriments on the spiritual path and helps one to fulfill all their desires. We must note very carefully that the Vaishnavas have been included within the full conception of divinity. These writings describe the Vaishnavas' extraordinary qualities and the spiritual benefit resulting from serving them. There are also several warnings regarding the disastrous effects of the Vaishnava Parad. And I'm just going to read this and then I'm going to complete this reading. This is quoted from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19, stating, if a devotee commits Vaishnava Aparad, his offense is like a mad elephant, uprooting and trampling his creeper of devotion. Afterwards, the creeper's leaves dry up and become lifeless. There are three categories of Vaishnavas, Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttam, described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Kaviraj Goswami states that to gain shelter of a Vaishnava, it is imperative to first receive the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu. So it continues to go on. Just see how sweet, how wonderful, how educational. You know, it's just a sample.
This is what you were reading in your hotel room?
This is the book, yeah, but I was reading a later chapter, which is, and I'd read all the way up to there, when Sachi Devi, that story. Yeah. So, all glories to Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Tadiya Tirobhav Mahamahotsav, Srila Bhakti Pramoda Purī Gosvāmī Maharaj ki jai. Srila Bhugarbha Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Shri Kashishwara Pandit Prabhu ki jai. The last day of Kartik ki jai. Gaur Premanand.
Shaving up
So Damodar Ashtakam is not sung tomorrow?
No, they sing it actually.
They do, okay.
They do sing it on the first day of,
Okay.
yeah.
And then the following is Katyayani Vrat after next day.
Well, the Katyayani Vrat, that Vrat, I think there's only one person who has made that into an annual 1 month Vrat. And I don't have to mention the name.
And actually Madhukar did that, and I must go now to make a phone call. He's really coming coming back on Thanksgiving Day.
So his plan didn't work. So what's the date? Thanksgiving?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday, one
Wow,
week
must be very
from
happy.
today.
Yeah.
Coming back. And then he's going to come up here. You're going to pick him
I
up.
think that's what we're going to do. That's one of the reasons we're calling, because
Ah.
there's going to be so many people trying to pull him here and there, but I believe he'll want to just get in the